All right, let's start. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to this KBART NISO session. The four of us are going to talk about KBART. I give a short introduction where we are with KBART today, and then we're going to discuss the KBART Phase 3 proposal. It's quite important that we discuss this. We also would like to see contributions from you, so we would really like to have this as a discussion. We're going to ask you all some questions, and we hope that you have some opinions about some of the things that we are raising and also some of the issues that we are raising, because there's obviously some issues around whether how far should we go with KBART, should we solve the problems that are identified as problems in this industry, etc. So I'm just going to start with a short introduction. My name is Christine Stohn. I work for Ex Libris. We're obviously a knowledge-based provider. I've been involved in KBART for many years now. It's really important for us because this is a format that is describing the transfer of data between content providers and knowledge bases, and it makes our work far more efficient than we had it before. So just to start, who of you knows KBART? Not everyone, but most people. Okay, just to give a short overview, KBART came up as a result of a report that was commissioned by the UKSG about 10 years ago. It describes a format which is used for transferring metadata from a content provider into a knowledge base. It's addressing problems of data accuracy, which is obviously also affecting then linking and open URL linking and everything around ERM, e-resource management. KBART is now in phase 2. It was in 2014. It was kind of extended for ebooks, consortia, and open access to meet some of the challenges that we had with that. And then this year we came out with KBART Automation. KBART Automation is an automatic process to transfer holdings data from a content provider into a knowledge base. So let me just show you very briefly how it works in the information landscape. So it's rather complicated. You have the discovery, the databases, the websites where users find the information they need. They have direct links, and they use also open URL links, which are going to the link resolver. The link resolver and the ERM system is sitting on top of a knowledge base. The knowledge base is obviously being updated by the content providers and by the knowledge base providers. And you see the red frame is kind of defining what KBART does. The KBART format is for the transfer of the title lists between the content providers and the knowledge base providers, and therefore the knowledge base providers can also automate the ingest of that data. KBART Automation in the information landscape is adding to this. So now this is taking care of title lists, local title lists, which means your holdings, library holdings, to be transferred from the content providers into the knowledge base. And in more detail, this is what it looks like. This is the process that was published this year. It's not just a format of the file, but it's also describing the process of the API and the automation. So we have the content provider that is giving an institution token to the library. The library is adding the institution token to the knowledge base front end. And then from that point onwards, the knowledge base can automatically send a request to the content provider API, can automatically get back a file and upload it into the knowledge base and update the knowledge base with your content, with your holdings. And that is a process that can run automatically, for example, every week, so that can be scheduled. So this is KBART Automation. That was a very brief overview. So the goal is for KBART to increase the accuracy of the KB content, the knowledge base content, to reflect accurately the title lists. KBART Automation is to allow the automatic localization of the knowledge base with the library holdings. The status today is KBART Phase 2 was published in 2014, I already said that, and the proposal in Phase 3 is in the approval process, and that is really what we want to discuss with you today. KBART Automation was published in 2019, so this is relatively new. But that's also in the implementation stage. Just to start, or to kind of start the discussion about Phase 3, what are some of the changes that we see in our information landscape since the first introduction of KBART? The granularity of level where items become available increases. For example, we were on title level some years ago. We are still on title level, but we also have article level now, for example, in hybrid open access journals. So how do we reflect holdings for article level in a knowledge base, or do we actually want to do that? More material becomes available and needs to be managed. So we used to talk about hundreds and thousands, now we're talking about millions. Just think of ebooks. Many more material types become available. We used to talk about journals and books, now we're talking about book chapters, audio material, images, etc., etc. And then also new business models appear and need to be managed. So the big question is, how can KBART help with these questions and with some of the challenges that we are seeing? And I'm passing it on to Andrew and Robert.
This isn't my slide, so I'll just let it be for a second. Just the idea that we're moving forward with phase 3 proposal. This is kind of the process of how it works. If you've worked with any of these NISO proposals, you've seen that eventually there's a public comment period, and there's kind of these steps in between where we're really in these early phases, and we're very eager to get people's feedback, like we mentioned. So my name is Robert Heaton. I'm collection management librarian at Utah State University. I've been on the KBART Standing Committee for just 2 years. Since the last revision of KBART, we've identified new needs as Christine just talked about. Some of these are relatively straightforward to address with new recommendations, but really even if we make no changes to what we're recommending, we feel that content providers will benefit from additional clarification on what's expected. And so together we're calling these our low-hanging fruit, things that we'll kind of move through quickly before moving on to the more substantive changes that we'll propose. So first, we feel that content providers could benefit from more detailed guidance on how to create compliant files. We have a lot of examples of this, but for example, do we separate our offerings into serials and monograph lists, or have a single all titles list? What do I do if I don't have a unique identifier for a preceding title in a title history? How do I handle a combined issue number like 3/4? How do I represent supplements where the title is different from the parent publication but the ISN is the same? Any of you that work with e-resources and serials know these things are tricky, but we can address these kinds of things. And also we're hoping to give more examples of what compliant files, what compliant fields look like, so that everyone can understand and implement the recommended practice. I'll also add that we want to know what your frustrations of like this have been, so that we can be sure to address those things. So please bring those to us. We're aware of a lot of them, but not all, I'm sure. We plan to draft a requirement that content providers include a README file or kind of an index to all their KBART files with such details as the names of all the records, the number of records in each file, the date created or updated. This can help us disambiguate between the many different packages and identify the files that are relevant to each library. And this idea of a version history of when the file was changed, whether it was before or after, some transfer of titles or other event, that could certainly meet lots of needs. One example of a need met by that is withdrawn content. So this is where my library buys a back file, but it's no longer offered for sale for one reason or another, and your library can't buy it. I need it in my KBART file, but you shouldn't have it in yours. And so we need to find a way to have kind of version control and understand which file is the correct one for each use.
Hi, I'm Andre Rothmacher from the University of Rhode Island. Also been on the committee for a couple of years and current co-chair along with Noah. So just a few other low-hanging fruits. As Christine mentioned, we're not just talking about journals and books anymore. We're talking about all kinds of content. Think of like a Gale database with primary source material, images, even like websites, manuscripts, data sets. How do we represent that in a KBART file? So we need to look at that. Also, since phase 2 came out, there's been an explosion in global content, and we just need to make some adjustments to better accommodate that. For example, content with non-Latin characters, transliterated or translated titles. Maybe we should be indicating the language of the content itself. And then currently our name field for author and editor only takes last name, but in some languages where last names are very common, perhaps extending that field and including a full name would provide more accurate metadata. We're looking at overhauling our endorsement process. So basically, the KBART Standing Committee endorses content providers, Elsevier, Springer, Taylor and Francis, IEEE, et cetera, as being KBART compliant or following the KBART practice. But we just have like endorsed or non-endorsed. We're thinking, what if we had a tiered endorsement system so that we could recognize those content providers who are, gold star, follow everything, but not scare off content providers who might not be able to meet all of the KBART requirements, but meet enough of them. And also, as we have 3 phases instead of just 2, a tiered system might help us not like recognize people who have achieved phase 2 compliance, but haven't yet worked up to phase 3. And currently, we also provide endorsements for knowledge-based vendors, but we realize we don't really know what that means since knowledge-based vendors typically consume KBART files, they don't create them, so we need to flesh that out. And then lastly, we want to include some model license language so we can ask our content providers and vendors in our licenses to be KBART compliant. A number of model licenses already reference KBART, such as LibLicense, California Digital Library, JISC, and CKRN in Canada. But we think it would be easier if we just created some out-of-the-box language that people could take and adapt. And KBART Automation, which, as Christine mentioned, came out this year, already has model language for KBART Automation, and so we might be able to fold that in.
Hi, so my name is Noah Levin. So I am, along with Andre, the co-chair of the KBART Standing Committee. I've also worked on the Automation Working Group as well. I've been involved in the publishing world for a few decades. You can probably tell by 1 or 2 gray hairs I have at this point. And I've been working in the KBART group since I was part of the phase 2 creation. So I'm going to go over some of the tough questions, which any friend or family member who knows me would not be surprised that that's the part I decided to take. So we're going to look over, I think, some of what the scope of what KBART is and what level of granularity we need in our metadata. So backing up a little bit in terms of why some of these questions have come up. KBART itself, so as Christine had mentioned, KBART was created initially, it came out in 2010. Original discussions about it were back in 2008. The publishing landscape has, of course, changed a little bit since then. So originally when KBART was first being put out, it was really kind of looking to support open URL linking. Open URL, for those of you who are not familiar, is just kind of putting bibliographic data into your URL and then being able to send that linking information to the knowledge base was a major component. So since that time, its usage has been heavily adopted, but it's used, I think, in kind of an expanded way. So on the one hand, publishers are communicating their sellable packages to the knowledge bases, how to link to that content. It's then shooting what the customer who made that purchase, it's sending that access information to the discovery layer, telling the discovery layer, hey, this user has access to this particular content. The other side to that is on the ERM level and populating that. It's also, at the same time, it's also showing librarians, what did they purchase? So the purchasing librarian is often different than the technical librarian who looks at this package name and says, I don't know what this actually means. So it's kind of robustly used to try and figure out this kind of linking information, access information, and what did I purchase. Part of that, so that has worked very well for its goal. Of course, the publishing world itself has kind of changed the way they sell ebook packages. So now you get bespoke information within those individual packages. Perhaps what you purchase might be a little bit different than somebody else. You might have grandfathered titles in there and things like that. So there might be occasional differences for each person. It's one size fits all. If anybody's ever tried to put one of those hats or shirts on, it doesn't always work great for everybody. So that's where KBART Automation came in. So that was roughly last year. No, not roughly, sorry, it was last year, where we put out the recommended practice for KBART Automation, and that's then automatically communicating to the knowledge bases what those institutional holdings are. And that has worked for the publishers that have implemented that. That works really well. So the other side to that is, of course, KBART itself, with automation, it's not really trying to reinvent KBART. So KBART itself needs to accommodate some of those automation needs. And because of that, that means then the scope of KBART is kind of expanding over the last decade. So we're looking at kind of revising that scope a little bit, just so that way it incorporates those kind of needs for automation and what some of you guys are using your KBART for. So I'm going to do a little bit of a back and forth. I'm going to talk about what some of these tougher questions are and what might be needed. So we're going to do a little bit of a back and forth, and then we'll also open it up to you guys in terms of what you think and whether it's needed. So article and chapter level metadata. So KBART is entirely on the title and journal level, which again works really well. However, what happens is that if a publisher wants to sell their content on an article and chapter level, KBART itself will not support that. So let's say a publisher, and this is something I personally saw, where a publisher wants to sell their content topically. So like, you want to look at a particular subject and say, okay, well, I want to sell all articles and chapters having to do with a specific subject. I want to create an algorithm that does that, and then I can fit my customer's needs. Within KBART itself, it's just going to show the full title and journal access, and then it's going to report that to the discovery layer, who's then going to think that you have access to the whole content when you don't. The other part is open access. Yeah, sometimes it's fully free, sometimes it's fully paid, but there is, of course, hybrid, which is something I know that we were contemplating for phase 2, and we realized there really wasn't an easy way to do that without article and chapter level reporting, and sometimes also just in general, you don't have access to the full book. So what happens is when you try and do this again, of course, you can't really, and I found myself in this position where I was trying to almost forge my KBART file to show what your access is when it's article and chapter, and it could be, all these different journals in this particular case, or all these different books. Especially with journals, it's not like a concrete coverage. So do I just list 50 random journal issues? Do I show a date range even though you only have partial access here and there? So that doesn't really work. And at the same time, it also would explode your KBART file. The other part of this, of course, is if you want to get this to work, you have to invent a little bit of a new process. So looking at that, although you want it to work with your KBART is effectively Excel files. I mean, it's tab delimited, and that can't support the rich data that article and chapter level is. So, you want to be able to create a process that can communicate that information, but at the same time ties into your KBART, so you're not lying in it, or for that matter, rendering it obsolete. So, and again, also then that would also allow you to report hybrid info. So, and then talking about maybe the challenges.
Okay, so so on one side we have the article level access, where you would expect your system, let's just generalize it and talk about the system, tell you if you have access to something or not on article level, even if it's only one article and an issue, to solve that situation. The problem with KBART is that, first of all, KBART is not not really designed to deal with article data. We can, of course, say, okay, phase 3, we're going to change that. We're adding article data, and maybe we can even change the format and say, we're switching from tab delimited to XML, and therefore we can deal with bigger files. But then you still have the problem that the knowledge bases were actually not set up to support article data. So you can send a KBART file, have lots of articles in there, but what do you do on the ingest side? So if we want to change that, and even if we want to address this in phase 3, there is the other side of it where the knowledge base actually needs to be changed to be able to support that. And then if you go beyond that, knowledge bases fulfill a very specific task, and they do it actually very well. So maybe the knowledge base is actually not the right place to do that. So in that sense, does this really, or is this something that we should address as KBART, or should we just say this is a problem we recognize, and that problem needs to be solved in a different place? So there are examples, for example, Unpaywall. Unpaywall has a big database, all open access on article level. I can go and say, I use the Unpaywall API and I request information about open access on article level on the fly. That is one way to deal with these things. And maybe we can extend such APIs to other places and keep the data actually in an index where we already index article data. I would also say that applies to a discovery index. We have article data in the discovery index. We can index open access flags, for example, or flags of availability in the discovery index. That would be another solution to that problem. So we have on one side, we know that we need to solve it. On the other side, we are in a system where we have KBART, which needs to be extended with article data, but also the other side of the knowledge base, and is this really the right place to put article data? So this is one of the tough questions that we need to answer and that we need to discuss.
Thank you. And so I guess one of the questions to you guys, and I'm going to move on to the next topic and then we'll open the floor. So one of the questions to you guys is in terms of what do you want to see? So in terms of your own personal usage, is this something that you feel you really need? Is this something where you have your own horror stories or perhaps not? So moving on to the next item before we open the floor is XML support. So right now, KBART files, it's as I mentioned before, it's a tab delimited format, and it works. And I should point out, it's something that people are happy with. But one of the things that came up, especially with automation, is the idea of having optional formats. So this is not something where we would say, don't use the tab delimited. So it's not something where it's like an either or, so much as like, optionally, if you want the publisher wants to create their files in a different way, this gives them that flexibility. So the question is really, should we create a standard for KBART where it could be communicated in XML? The reason for that is databases truthfully ingest XML a lot better than tab delimited files. And also especially once you start moving into the world of automation, because you're kind of automatically sending for so many different customers, it would allow your developers then put that into XML for better ingestion. And I know personally, when I was putting out automation with my publisher, it was one of the first questions my developers asked me was, can we just put this in XML? And the answer was no. So please keep this in the KBART format. So it's about really kind of creating some flexibility where you can do this if you prefer. So.
Yeah, just a few comments about it. I mean, again, there are pros and cons. Since Noah is the goodie, I'm the baddie here.
Very rare for me, by the way.
I would say never change the running system. The tab delimit works well at the moment. Also, don't forget there are current processes for the ingest, which are really working well. The knowledge bases are designed to take that sort of data. Again, works really well. So the question is, do we really want to change that? It puts more burden onto the knowledge base, obviously, if we have vendors coming with different formats. On the other hand, like Noah already mentioned, the files are growing bigger. And if we talk about automation, then maybe XML is actually a better option. Again, it's up for discussion. But one of the points, and I seriously think that's an important point, KBART is hugely successful. It's It's been working really well for a number of years, and I think it's going to continue to work well. So we need to be cautious that we're not making changes, which is actually kind of, interrupting that flow.
So with that, I'm going to open the floor. We kind of just put up a couple of discussion ideas, but really want to open the mic to anybody that might have a question. Please feel free to come up, or a point, or really anything. So if you'd like to come up and say anything, anybody have any?
Hi, my name is Amanda. I'm at Columbia University, and we've been working on incrementally improving our users' ebook experience, and we're currently very interested in direct linking to PDF or EPUB level book downloads. And right now, we're kind of hitting a wall because it's not part of KBART. So we use a knowledge base, and that's how we prefer to access our metadata and link to the records. But we kind of need, I guess, the KBART standard to change to enable the direct level linking. So I'm just wondering if...
At the moment, linking is at the moment not part of the KBART file. I mean,
Right.
it provides a link, but it's more for identification of the journal level. It's not, or the book level. It's not really meant to provide a direct full text link. It's something that, to my knowledge, was not discussed because linking, as I said, is not currently part of it.
Right.
Yeah, that's...
So like we've kind of talked to we use Entoda, and they've kind of advised us that they would need KBART, the KBART files to adjust in order to enable direct linking for us.
Yeah,
because
maybe...
like the publishers currently don't provide the direct links in the feeds that I guess the knowledge base is receiving. So it would kind of need, like they're telling us that they would need this to change in order to...
Yeah, I think what they probably mean is that there are title level links in the KBART files. They were really not meant to be used for that, but
Right.
That doesn't matter. They can still
Right.
be used for that. So if we were to extend KBART, then that would mean that we probably need to add a second title linking field. Currently has one column, and then we would need a second one for, let's say, PDF links, and then maybe there are other links because
like
specifically for
EPUB.
ebooks,
Yeah,
there
'cause they'll have
EPUB and there are
EPUB,
other formats, and then we probably need more columns for. It's a good point. I don't think it's been discussed as far as I know.
No, actually, it's the first time I've actually heard a request for it. So we haven't previously discussed that. But yeah, I mean, like Christine said, we would need to add additional columns to add that ability if that's something that folks need.
I mean, there are other ways to achieve that too. It's probably, for the knowledge base provider, it's probably easiest if it's really being added to the KBART files. That's a good point, because for ebooks, I mean, not for journals.
Yeah,
it's really specific for ebooks. But the other way to deal with it would be to just create the links on the knowledge, because that's what the knowledge base is designed to do. There's a link resolver there, which has programs to create the links. That would be the second.
Because I think like our knowledge base is telling us that they're not even receiving that information from the publishers, and the publishers are saying like we need because they're using KBART for these communications, I guess, with each other, that they need the KBART to change in order to be able to transfer that information to each other. And because we buy ebooks at such a large scale, there's no way for us to just do it on a publisher level, even if we were to get the information from the publishers directly, because we have so many purchases and subscriptions. We have over 2 million ebooks in our catalog right now. Like we really need it to work at scale.
Is the link to the PDF always on book level, or could it be that it's on chapter
level?
No,
right now a lot of them are at the chapter level, but publishers are starting to allow full book downloads on the whole level, and that's ideally where we would go. But we even know right now that not all publishers provide.
Right. I mean, the KBART files would provide book data anyway. At the moment, we are not on chapter level. That's what we are discussing. But if you think that it's already a good idea to have the PDF links, EPUB links, or whatever in the KBART files, then that's something I think we can take and discuss. I think it's a very good point. We should probably not forget the other way to deal with it. The links could be created by the programs on the link resolver side. So there's there are two parts to it.
Yeah.
But it might be easier to have it in the KBART file.
Yeah. Okay. I'd be happy to talk further as well.
I would just add a couple things. one thing we're trying to sort out is what falls within the scope of KBART and what doesn't. You know, is there a change to the open URL standard that could change, or somewhere else entirely? So we're trying to keep track of all these kinds of things. Certainly, as questions come, we're jotting them down. But if you have details, or some of you, I'm sure someone else at your institution is the right person with KBART questions, please bring that handout home, and we've got the online version of that survey of what is it that you're looking for us to address. And we'd love to get your contact info and follow up and make sure that everybody's needs are addressed. But yeah, just in short, we'll try to capture that and include that in our discussion. But
It's a very good point.
Yeah, well, because in addition to our own knowledge base, our organization is working with Simply E, which is an application for, it's an app to read ebooks, and so we're working on improving that. NYPL is currently developing it, and Lyricist is also now involved, so we're currently developing that. So we kind of also need this to work with that product so that we could enable access to ebooks through the Simply E application as well. So that's also kind of why we're interested.
If we were if we wanted to get some feedback from the publisher side, which publisher would you recommend we talk to? Just to get, we just want to get some ideas of.
So we've been talking with Springer, and I think they currently have direct links to their full text downloads of their books, but they don't have a way to get us that information right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
And also ProQuest would be a good one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Related to the question discussed, I'm Julie Zhu from IEEE. Sometimes I receive requests from consortia saying that we need the publication DOIs in that column, in the KBART list. They want journal DOI links and book DOI links. So we are trying to insert an extra column into our KBART list, but I'm just wondering if the KBART Standing Committee is considering that.
We did get a request for that. I remember, I'm trying to remember the reasoning behind it. There was, on the knowledge base side, there was some concerns with the DOI, simply because they needed it to point specifically to the title landing page. Do you remember what those, I'm feeling, sorry, the 10:45 a.m. I think has scrambled my brain.
There's not always a DOI, if you're on a third-party platform like EBSCO, the DOI isn't.
No, it's for linking. No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't help for linking if it's on a
Right.
separate platform. Yeah, that's true. Although it would probably. I'm just trying to say something intelligent, but I have to think about it in a minute. If it would actually help if we add it. So the DOI would be on which level? You would have the DOI on the book, or on the book chapter, or.
So the specific requests we received were for the journals. And so for us, our journals are our own journals. We don't mind adding the DOIs, but the books, we are a secondary hosting platform, so we prefer not to add them. But I understand, but so just for us, we probably just will just insert that column just for our own KBART lists. I'm not sure that, that can.
Yeah, but what would it, because it's not, if you add this to journals, I mean, we're talking about article level linking. Each article has its own DOIs.
No, it's for that's the journal, not article level. It's really the journal periodical level DOI.
I know some of the concern was not every title through a DOI links directly to the title page.
That's right.
So I know when I was mentioning that, I think a few months ago, that was one of the immediate concerns that came up from one of the knowledge bases, which was, so when you have a journal or a book that say rights are distributed between different publishers, when you click on the DOI, it doesn't actually go to a specific page. It goes to kind of that page where you can choose what publisher to see it through. And I remember that was one of the major concerns.
It's kind of like a title ID, no? I mean, we have already a column in the KBART file, which is the title ID. I mean, it doesn't really matter whether it's a DOI or whether it's something else.
Yeah. I think, and yeah, the thing is, like, I'm not sure whether the committee or has done a survey or investigation about who is really using these KBART lists. We know that KBART lists originally were designed just for the communication between the content providers to a knowledge base. But later on, we find that different kinds of groups are using them for different kinds of purposes.
Yes.
And
That's
then they
true.
ask us to do this and that. But and we would rather add extra columns to the KBART lists instead of creating a separate set of title lists. So I think, but when we add extra columns, like, let's say, publication DOIs or frequencies, and quite a few consortia, they want us to add frequencies because they want to calculate how many issues a journal actually has, so to justify whatever may be the cost, etc. And some ask for subjects or topics. And so for if we add these extra columns, and I understand not everybody will do that, but it'll be nice if there will be a standardized, item names, then we could use so that we will not confuse with with other publishers.
I think one of the things we can do is we can explore the need for adding DOI. So right now, I think it says specifically just to use the title URL, which of course comes from the fact that KBART originally was helping with open URLs. So I think one of the things we can do is we can have some discussions amongst the discovery services and also publishers, and see if that's something, and you guys, to see if that's something that is needed, and then we can incorporate that into what we're doing.
Yeah,
Right.
I think maybe some annotations to remind people that that DOI may not work for all the platforms, right? I think that's just remind people.
That's as soon as you start giving explanations, that's getting a little bit difficult, because either you have that format or you don't have that format. It's a little bit difficult. The other thing that I would say, because you raised subjects and frequency and that sort of thing, what KBART did not intend to do is to transfer metadata beyond the metadata that is needed to identify an item in the knowledge base. That is the purpose of KBART. We did have requests over the years to add, specifically for ebooks, I think, to add metadata items, but that's really kind of repurposing KBART.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that we couldn't say, KBART 3 or KBART 4, we're actually going to add this, but it's beyond the purpose. Currently, it's beyond the scope and purpose of KBART to add metadata, because it was specifically not meant to do that.
Yeah, it's and I think that's also part of its success story. So I don't know about you all, but I personally hate Microsoft products, and the reason for that. Don't worry, I'm going somewhere with this. The reason for that is Microsoft products try and do a lot of different things, and it ends up breaking them because it tries to be everything to everybody. So KBART isn't really a bibliographic standard. And what it does do quite well, which is communicating what you've purchased and how to link to it. So when you start talking bibliographic standards, that really starts falling into the realm of MARC records, or on the trade side of Life Onyx. Or if you want to get into newer topics, we can talk about BibFrame and so on. So it's not trying to solve those particular worlds. So once we start getting into that scope, we do want to tread carefully, because we don't want to break KBART itself. Of course, I'm the same person that also wants article and chapter level data, so I can be a hypocrite sometimes.
Okay, looks like our session's out of time. Thanks for joining us. Please do drop off the survey if you have feedback you'd like to give us about things for us to consider, or take it online. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.